Okay, think about this. You've got a poet, 19th century Bristol, Jared Malahyde,
Hmm.
and he's feeling this deep, like really unsettling dread, almost like a shadow hanging over everything.
Right. And then, almost at the same time, you hear about this young girl, Emily.
Yeah, just out in the street, and she suddenly collapses. No obvious reason why.
Seems like two totally separate things happening.
Exactly. Doesn't seem connected at all. But these are actually our starting points for today. The first little, well, ripples in a very strange pond, you could say.
Yeah, exactly. And these little glimpses, these moments that feel sort of familiar, but also just wrong, they come from this really intriguing set of sources that you, our listener, shared with us.
Right. So for this deep dive, we're getting into excerpts from a fictional work, Doctor Who, Reckless Engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it is fiction, obviously, but the way it's written, it layers in all this historical detail about Bristol.
Yeah, it feels grounded.
It does. So when things start to go off kilter, and believe me, they do, it really makes you pay attention. It paints this picture of a reality that's just subtly but significantly different.
And our mission here really is to try and understand what's going on in this altered reality.
Yeah.
What are those signs, those little clues that tell you this isn't the 19th century we learned about?
Yeah, what happened? What could have caused such a huge shift?
Exactly. And, how does it affect the people living through it, the characters in the story? We're looking for those connections, those sort of aha moments that shed light on how strange this world actually is.
Okay, let's dive right in then.
Yeah.
1831, Bristol. We meet Jared Malahyde, the poet.
Right.
But he's not just thinking about poetry. He's got this intense feeling, this shadow, he calls it, looming over him. He even sees the riots happening in Bristol then as physical signs of it. The finger edges of the shadow, I think he says.
Which is quite a phrase. Very poetic, but also very doom-laden.
It is. And what's interesting about him, too, is this internal struggle he has.
Between poetry and engineering, right?
Yes. Seems like just a personal thing at first, which path to take.
Yeah.
But it turns out to be surprisingly important later on.
That's a good point. Maybe it's foreshadowing something larger, like a hint about the choices this whole reality is facing.
Could be. Then there's poor Emily. Just a kid playing, and boom, this big ache hits her. She collapses.
Yeah.
And what really struck me was Nanner's reaction. It seemed, well, over the top, even for a worried nanny back then.
Disproportionate, yeah.
Right. It suggests this isn't just, a kid getting sick. There's this feeling of something unknown, maybe even dangerous, connected to it. Could that be one of the first signs that reality itself is unstable?
I think so. That sudden, unexplained collapse, it definitely introduces this element of instability. It makes you wonder, are basic biological things working differently here? Are there unpredictable forces at play?
Okay, let's shift over to Ashton Court. We meet Abuetta.
Mm-hmm.
She's having this nice moment, dancing, feeling free, and then suddenly this horrible noise, a high-pitched, agitated ringing, just cuts through everything.
Shatters the moment.
Completely. Then Mr. Malahyde shows up, looking really serious, brings some kind of bad news, we don't know what yet, but it stops her dancing immediately. It's a small thing, but it feels like it signals bigger troubles brewing outside those walls.
That sudden interruption, that jarring sound, it definitely feels like a major disruption. And it suggests the bad news isn't just personal, it's something widespread that's even reaching into this relatively sheltered place.
Yeah, Malahyde's face confirms it. Whatever's happening is serious.
Unavoidable.
Okay, fast forward. Abuetta is leaving Ashton Court. Now, she thinks the year is the 2060.
Which is already a huge clue, right? 160.
Big one. She's got guards. Captain Bryant, the guard captain, is described as being really old. And the wall around the estate, it's not just a wall, it feels like a barrier, like the edge of the known world.
Keeping something out, or maybe keeping something in?
Could be. And she's given a pistol. It's described as being from before Year Not.
You're not. There it is. That term just screams that something massive happened, a reset point.
Absolutely. It implies this huge dividing line in their history, before and after.
And that pistol detail, before you're not, it's crucial. It strongly suggests some kind of cataclysm that changed everything, even how they date things, maybe how things are even made.
And Captain Bryant being so old? Maybe that's another hint. Like, time is weird here.
Could be a subtle clue about accelerated aging or some kind of distortion. Good catch.
So her journey takes her towards Bristol. But it's not the Bristol she knows from Malahyde's books. She sees it as a hostile wasteland.
Shocking difference.
Totally. Rubble everywhere, gardens overgrown, just decay.
Yeah.
And then they get attacked.
Yeah, the Wildren.
Yeah, these creatures sound absolutely terrifying. Ragged, pale, like feral humans.
And firearms aren't very effective against them.
Barely. They have to run for it. But then during the chase, there's this noise, a low, distant-sounding boom.
And it scares the Wildren off.
Yeah, sends them scattering. So what do you think that is? Some kind of weapon? Natural event? Something else?
Hard to say initially. But Aboeta seeing Bristol as a wasteland, that tells you society collapsed drastically. The difference from Malahyde's books just highlights how much this reality has changed course.
And the Wildren.
They represent this raw, savage threat. And the fact they fear that boom, it points to some other even more powerful force out there that even they respect or dread. The guns not working well also hints that maybe the rules of this world are different.
Right, when it looks like game over for Aboeta, guess who shows up?
Let me guess. Blue box.
You got it.
Yeah?
The doctor arrives in the TARDIS. Aboeta naturally is pretty suspicious.
Wouldn't you be?
Totally. The doctor's there with his companions, Fitz and Anji, and the doctor finds the name Wildren kind of funny.
He would.
But here's where the timeline confusion really hits hard. Aboeta says the year is 151.
Okay, she said 160 earlier when leaving. Maybe she's flustered or there's confusion even among them. But still, way off from 1831.
Right, maybe a slight discrepancy there. But the point is, the doctor scans things, and his instruments say something completely different, like centuries different from what Aboeta thinks. That's a massive gap.
Yeah, that's the moment it becomes undeniable. The timeline is fractured. The different dating systems aren't just a curiosity. They point to fundamentally different histories playing out.
The doctor's arrival is like the catalyst, isn't it? The outside perspective needed to start figuring this mess out.
Definitely. He starts looking around Bristol, noticing the architecture.
Yeah, he says it's all Georgian or pre-Georgian, which fits. But then he sees features and structures which look as if they shouldn't be there at all.
More evidence that history went wrong somewhere. Diverse.
Exactly. And he gets pretty worried, mentions a grim outlook about the time vortex potentially collapsing. Now, can you explain that a bit? What is the time vortex, and why is its collapse such a big deal?
Okay, think of the time vortex as like the underlying structure of space-time. It's the medium, the energy that makes time travel possible in his universe.
Right.
If it becomes unstable or collapses, well, that's catastrophic. You could get paradoxes, timelines ripping apart, reality is just unraveling. So the doctor being worried means the problem here is potentially huge, affecting the very fabric of time itself.
Okay, got it. So Aboeta leads them to a place called Totterdown. It's a settlement, fortified with a high wooden wall.
Defensive. Sounds like they're scared.
Very. The welcome is definitely not warm. The people inside are thin, look malnourished, and they are deeply suspicious of anyone new.
Understandable, given the Wildren and the wasteland outside.
Aboeta actually bumps into someone she knows there, Robin Larkspur. But she's shocked he looks totally different, much older or changed somehow. And he talks about things happening days ago that don't line up with her experience at all. More time weirdness.
Yeah, the timeline confusion continues even within the small community.
Then they meet the leader, Morgan Foster, the chief elder. He seems impressive, but he's cautious, asking questions that just add more layers to the mystery about the date. It really feels like they've walked into a place with its own separate, warped sense of history.
Totterdown really paints this grim picture of life after whatever happened. The walls, the suspicion, the poor health. It's a society barely holding on. And Robin's changed appearance, the conflicting timing, it suggests the temporal effects might not be uniform, maybe hitting people differently or localized.
The doctor decides to get straight to the point. He questions Aboeta directly about the date, and the description says he has this, unsettling gaze while doing it.
He needs answers. He knows something is fundamentally wrong.
And they finally get some answers, or at least a version of them, from a Father Gottlieb.
Okay.
He's the one who explains year naught and the cleansing. He says it was this cataclysm 160 years before their present.
160 years, so that lines up with Aboeta's earlier mention of the year 160.
Right. He says it decimated the population, led to the Wildren appearing, maybe they're mutated survivors, and the rise of the citizen elders, like Foster.
So the cleansing is the defining event, the year naught marker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the effects. They were horrifying. Apparently, anyone going through puberty died instantly from incredibly rapid aging.
Horrific.
And younger kids, they suddenly aged decades in moments.
Yeah.
Became adults or even elderly overnight.
That's bizarre and terrifying. What about animals?
Gone. Gottlieb says they vanished too, presumably from the same accelerated aging process. It's just a nightmare scenario.
Wow. Okay, so the cleansing explains the wasteland, the Wildren, the low population, the fear. It's the linchpin, like you said. This selective, brutal aging effect is unlike anything we know. It explains why they marked "you're not." It was a complete break from the past. The animal detail, too, that suggests it was a fundamental biological disruption.
So the doctor hears all this, and he comes up with this, well, frankly mind-bending theory.
Okay, what's his take?
He suggests that the cleansing made time speed up, but only along certain dimensions, specifically ones linked to metabolism.
Metabolism, like biological processes.
Yeah, so biological clocks went hyperspeed for certain age groups, while overall time, like total time passing, stayed, well, not static exactly, but didn't accelerate in the same way. It's like different parts of reality started ticking at different speeds.
That's complex. But it's an attempt to make sense of the impossible, right? To find a sort of scientific explanation, however strange, for why some aged instantly and others didn't, and why the world is 160 years on for them, but maybe not for time itself in some other sense.
Right. It's his way of trying to frame these bizarre aging effects within some kind of temporal physics, even if it's physics gone haywire.
Okay, so things are starting to make a bit more sense in a very strange way.
Sort of. But then Abuetta gets back to Ashton Court, back to Mr. Malahyde.
Ah, back to the poet.
And here's another massive twist. His entire estate, Ashton Court. It's a temporal anomaly.
Oh, what? Like a bubble in time.
Right. Exactly. Time moves differently inside compared to outside. Get this. 4 months for someone inside the estate equals 10 years passing in the outside world.
10 years. Wow. So Malahyde's been living much slower than everyone else.
Effectively, yes. And there's physical proof the wall around the property. It's weathered completely differently on the inside versus the outside, showing the different rates of time passing.
That's incredible physical evidence of a time distortion.
Malahyde knows about it. He's aware of the difference. He's basically become a recluse, trapped, or maybe choosing to stay, in his own little island of time.
So what could cause that? A localized time warp around his house?
Well, Malahyde finally reveals what might be the cause. He takes Abuetta down to a secret cellar.
Uh-oh. Secret cellar. Never good.
And inside, there's this big, mysterious device glowing green. He calls it the Utopian Engine.
The Utopian Engine. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's involved.
And he tells this wild story. He says years ago, he met Isambard Kingdom Brunel, the famous engineer.
Wow, Brunel.
Okay. And then, suddenly, Malahyde collapses. Feels like a heart attack. But then he sees this swirling green fog.
Green fog. Like the engine glow.
Maybe. And through this fog, he makes contact with beings from the far, far future. They call themselves the Eternans.
Eternans. Okay, so we've got aliens or future beings involved now. This just keeps getting bigger.
Right. According to Malahyde, these Eternans told him they needed his help. Their goal was to guide humanity through a dangerous point in the future, a nexus point in the early 1900s.
Guide them how?
To prevent some future catastrophe they called the Fall, and instead bring about an age of enlightenment. Noble goal, supposedly.
Supposedly. And how is Malahyde supposed to help?
By building the Utopian Engine for them. They even gave him help. An alien entity named Watchlar shared his mind, guiding the construction.
Shared his mind. Like possessed him.
That's how Malahyde describes it. He said it was a deeply unpleasant experience being controlled like that.
I bet. Doesn't sound very enlightened.
The engine was finally finished in 1843, which, remember, became their year naught. And as soon as it was done, Watchlar just vanished.
Gone. So the attorneys presented this whole thing as, we're helping humanity avoid disaster, build this engine for us.
Pretty much. Benevolent guides from the future helping us poor primitives. But is that the real story?
It sounds suspicious.
Ow.
Especially the mind-sharing part. Altruistic beings don't usually need parasitic helpers.
Exactly. And the doctor, putting all the pieces together, the cleansing, the weird aging, year naught, the engine, he figures out something much darker.
Okay, what's his conclusion?
He deduces that cleansing wasn't an accident. It wasn't some side effect. It was the direct result of the Utopian Engine firing up and drawing massive amounts of energy.
So the engine caused the cleansing.
That's his theory. And why? He thinks the Eternian's home, this place called the Eternium, isn't some advanced future utopia. It's actually a dying pocket universe.
Dying. So
Yeah.
they needed energy.
Desperately. The doctor believes their whole story to Malahyde guiding humanity, Age of Enlightenment, was a complete lie. A manipulation to get him to build the engine.
So the engine wasn't utopian at all. It was a siphon.
Pretty much. The doctor thinks the cleansing wasn't about guiding anyone. It was about the engine sucking vast amounts of energy, maybe life energy, from this reality to feed their dying Eternium.
And the horrific aging effects were just collateral damage. Or maybe part of the energy extraction process.
Possibly. The doctor believes the Eternians didn't care. They were willing to drain this entire reality, potentially destroying all life, just to save themselves.
That is incredibly grim. A parasitic act on a universal scale. That reframes everything. They weren't guides, they were desperate predators.
Yeah, quite the twist from benevolent future beings.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the doctor has to intervene.
Of course.
He manages to stop the process before the cleansing becomes absolute, preventing the total destruction of this reality, and maybe stopping knock-on effects to others.
So he fixes it? Or tries to.
He does something. The altered timeline seems to sort of revert. It snaps back closer to a recognizable 1843, but not perfectly.
How so? What's different?
Well, things like Brunel's SS Great Britain and the Clifton Suspension Bridge seem more advanced than they should be for 1843. Little echoes, maybe? Subtle changes left behind?
Ripples from the averted future, perhaps? Or just consequences of messing with time?
Could be. Malahyde and Aboeta, they're still together, seemingly continuing their relationship within their little time bubble at Ashton Court.
So the anomaly persists for them?
Apparently so.
Huh.
But Fitz, one of the doctor's companions, he's left with messed up memories. Fragments. This haunting feeling of a past that he lived through but is now gone.
A personal cost. A reminder that the reality was real for those who lived it.
Definitely. And the doctor? Well, he moves on. The temporal engineer, as the source calls him, off to fix other broken bits of time, presumably.
Leaving us with a lot of questions still.
So many. Like, why did this timeline diverge in the first place, even before the Eternians showed up? Was there an initial weakness?
Good question. And was the Utopian Engine only about energy? Or did it have some other function the Eternians weren't mentioning?
And how many other altered realities like this are out there? Did the doctor truly fix it or just patch it up? What are the long-term consequences of what he did?
Yeah, the resolution feels more like containment than a complete reset. It really underscores how fragile time is and how mucking about with it, even trying to fix it, always leaves marks. Fitz's fragmented memories are a powerful symbol of that, the ghost of a timeline that ceased to exist.
So just to recap the big takeaways here,
Hmm.
we dove into this world that was just off right, subtly wrong. We found out about this devastating event, the cleansing, which turned out to be caused by this massive time-manipulating engine.
Built under the influence of these aliens, the Eternians, who were not what they seemed.
Not at all. And then the doctor steps in, does his thing, and tries to put history back on a more familiar track, but leaves these little echoes behind. It's amazing how things that seemed random at the start, the poet's dread, the girl collapsing, all tied back to this huge, hidden manipulation of time.
Absolutely. And I think the really standout points, the things that make you go, whoa, are just how brutal and bizarre the cleansing was.
Yeah, the aging thing is nightmare fuel.
Right. Then the existence of that time bubble at Ashton Court time, literally working differently just down the road.
Incredible.
And finally, the sheer manipulative, parasitic nature of the Eternians, pretending to be saviors while planning to basically consume an entire reality. It's deeply unsettling.
It really is.
Yeah.
So what does all this mean for you listening in? I think this kind of story, this deep dive into a broken timeline, really makes you think about our own reality, doesn't it? How fragile is history? How easily could things have gone differently? It highlights how tiny changes, or maybe not so tiny ones like building a utopian engine, could lead to vastly different outcomes.
It definitely makes you consider time and cause and effect in a new way. And maybe it leaves you with a final thought to chew on.
Oh, what's that?
Well, if you could actually get a glimpse into an alternate reality, one where things went differently, would you want to know if our world, the one you're living in, is the right one, the original one?
That's a heavy question. Does it matter?
Does it? And what responsibility do we have, if any, to protect our own timeline? Especially if other possibilities exist out there, maybe even possibilities that seem better in some ways.
Wow. Okay, that's definitely something to think about. Maybe now's a good moment for you to go back, look at those source excerpts again with all this in mind, and see what other connections you can make.